Friends, chess players, welcome back to our usual appointment with middle game instruction. Today we're going to talk about 3 very common mistakes in the middle game, and we'll also try to understand how to avoid them. I'll show you a game, so let's cut to the chase and open the interface right away. It's one of my games, and my opponent has about 2,000 points. ELO, this is a game from the Arco International Festival from a few years ago, not the one I won, but another year. And right away I'll start analyzing this game so we can include these 3 mistakes and try to understand how to work on them. The first mistake is related to the concept, even in the opening, but then, let's say, it also gets mixed up a bit in the middle game. It's a structural concept, meaning not knowing a structure. Specifically, in this game, I made a move order inversion. That is, I played a queen's game, but I played it with the move order, let's say, of the reti, this particular reti with e3, which is known as the reti. There's Axel Smith's book on this variation on c6. I play c4, and at this point, after knight to f6, I transpose into a queen's game, specifically a Slav, with the move d4. Usually this game is played, of course, with this move order: d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6. I played it with a different move order, so I played it with the order knight f3, d5, e3, c6, c4. And I probably threw my opponent off a bit, because in this position, after d4, he played e6. I've already talked to you about this position. This move is a structural mistake because this structure here is the famous Meran structure. The Meran structure is usually played like this. Let me show you this one here. It's the Meran structure, which is basically played in this way. And black's goal is to capture on c4, and then push bishop 5, but making white lose a tempo. So after the move e3, black gains this tempo with the knight. Knight to d7 waits for white to move the bishop to d3, and at that point captures on c4, making the bishop lose a tempo. And at this point, after b5, what black achieves is an expansion on the queen side. Furthermore, the presence of the knight on c3 means that the pawn will one day go to b4 as well, causing further problems in white's position. If we look at our game, at this moment after e6, I haven't played any knight yet. c3, this means that I can play the move, knight to d2. And at this point, when I play c4, if black wants to capture, I can recapture with the knight. And in case of b5, my knight is not on c3, so I won't be exposed to a possible b4. You see how studying a given structure helps us understand when it's appropriate to play it and when it's better not to. So this is definitely the first mistake we make, somewhere between the opening and the middle game. Maybe we memorize the moves without understanding the structure, so as soon as one move changes, we still play that same variation, which, however, turns out to be completely wrong. Let's move on to the second mistake, because the second mistake is even more serious. The game continues with the move, knight b to d7. So exactly as if it were an Amerano. But as I told you before, it's not an Amerano. Because after bishop to d3, if pawn takes, I would capture with the knight, and after b5, the knight meanwhile goes to a stronger square, which is e5. And above all, there is no knight on c3 that black can put under pressure, thank you, with the move b4. At this point, however, my opponent plays this other move, queen to c7, which maybe isn't very precise, but oh well, we can make it work for now. White plays short castling, and here we are, reaching the second mistake that is very often made in the middle game, which is underestimating the opponent's dynamism. Let's look at this position. White has already castled and has already developed 3 minor pieces. And when we talk about dynamism, as I've often told you, we're mainly talking about piece development, space advantage, and king safety. In this position, the space is more or less equal, although as you can see, white has 2 pawns side by side in the center, so actually white is even slightly ahead. King safety, well, what can I say? I've already castled as black, right? Development advantage, well, as mentioned, white has already castled and developed 3 minor pieces. So in this position, white has a dynamic advantage. What does that mean? It means that since black is at a dynamic disadvantage, so has less development, less dynamism, black needs to play it safe, avoid making overly aggressive moves, and perhaps focus on regaining some dynamism, maybe by developing their pieces. For example, black can try to play the move bishop to e6, develop their pieces, and so on. Try to make progress, but what you shouldn't do, and here we come to the second middle game mistake, is to play active moves when your position doesn't allow for dynamism. Because here my opponent plays the move e5, an extremely active move that also risks opening up the position. And black cannot afford this kind of dynamic play because they don't have enough dynamism. In fact, they have less dynamism. Any opening of the game favors white, so what does white play here? If you want to think about it for a moment, I invite you to pause the video for white. Here, obviously in this case that's what happens. I make the move that opens up the game because white has a dynamic advantage, so e4. So I try to open up the game in the most aggressive way because I have a development advantage. His king is in the center, so I'm quite happy for the game to open up. Pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes e4, you see. The game has almost completely opened up, and after knight to f6 here someone might think, be careful, your bishop is being attacked, so maybe we should move it, right? This bishop is very strong in this position, so I would like to keep this bishop. However, ubi mayor minus esat. So when there is something more important, we look at the most important things first. Beautiful, truly beautiful, this bishop, but his king is extremely weak. So here I can play rook to e1, taking advantage of the position of his king. So here he can't really, let's say, play this move, or rather he can make it. But after rook takes e4, obviously at the very least, thanks to these pins and this development advantage, he will end up losing material. So, alright, I gave up that bishop, which was very strong, but in return I took a pawn, which, is quite a lot. And at this point then my opponent plays bishop to 7, but in any case I take the pawn anyway, he takes the bishop, so actually more or less what happened was a reversal, the pawn. I probably would have taken it anyway. Rook takes e4. And at this point, after bishop to f5, I move the rook with rook to e1 and we reach the third one. Middle game mistake. The third mistake, which honestly is closely connected to the second, is ignoring the king's safety, comma. When we have less dynamism than our opponent, because I've always told you this, if the dynamism is on our side, I'm not saying we should ignore the king's safety. But as long as the dynamism is ours, the attacking potential is ours and not our opponent's. But here again, it's clear that white is quite dominant in this position, so white is strong and dynamic. Black must not underestimate the dynamism and absolutely must take care of the king's position. So here, castling short is a move you should make without even thinking. My opponent, on the other hand, completely underestimates the position of his king. And what does he do? He creates even more weaknesses. So, third mistake. Underestimating the king's position, especially when creating further weaknesses. This move, let's say, aims to remove my knight from the outpost on the 5th square. It's wrong tactically, but it's mainly wrong from a strategic point of view. Because in this position, black should not create weaknesses when already at a disadvantage dynamically. Here I could have played any move. I already have an extra pawn. Even with the move knight to f3, white would have had an advantage. But here there is a tactical move called active defense. I also showed it to you in the rules of attack and told you that you can use active defense when you have dynamism. What is active defense? It means ignoring your opponent's threats and creating your own. So I play queen to f3. Attacking his bishop. I repeat, you can only do this if you have a dynamic advantage, otherwise you shouldn't. At this point, my opponent plays g6, trying to defend the bishop. Here comes another very nice active defense move, which is bishop to f4. I don't move the knight, and with this move I attack the queen with an x-ray. And not only that, I'm attacking something else as well, but I won't spoil it because I'll let you figure it out as an exercise. And obviously black can't capture the knight, because after bishop takes e5, this here is a double attack and we win back the piece. Obviously the rook. At this point, black plays the move queen to c8, trying to free up the queen, and now comes the tactic, just like in the best stories. If you ignore all the principles you should be following, at some point you'll be punished tactically. If you want to pause to look for the tactic, of course, go ahead. Here, the tactic that wins the game instantly is this move right here. Knight takes c6. It's a knight sacrifice, but it's a fairly temporary sacrifice. Because thanks to this pin, now we win back the piece with bishop to d6. So for example, b takes c6 and bishop to d6. Finally, black castles. But obviously that's 2 pawns down. And moreover, of course, there's a rook that's extremely dominant. On rook to e8, I don't need to be told twice. I keep control of the file with rook to e1, rook takes e7, rook takes e7. Here, the position is simply completely lost. I have extra pawns, I have initiative on the 7th rank, and my opponent here plays queen to a6. And here, there's the final blow to win, which is very simply g4. I attack the bishop and then take the pawn on f6. In this position, my opponent resigned because, of course, there was nothing left to do. If the bishop is moved to any square, obviously queen takes f6 follows. And after that, there are several mates on the board. So today I brought you this game to illustrate these three mistakes. So the first mistake, first of all, a structural one, a lack of knowledge about pawn structures. The second is dynamic, from the perspective that if you don't have the initiative, you shouldn't be the one making breakthrough pushes. And the third is king safety. Whenever you lack dynamism, it shouldn't be underestimated, and above all, you shouldn't create weaknesses for yourself like my opponent did. Do you remember here? He made this move, f6. Don't create unnecessary weaknesses, especially when your king is exposed, especially when you lack dynamism. So I hope you appreciated this analysis and these principles as always. If you want to support me, subscribe to the channel, give a tactical like, and leave a positional comment. And I'll see you in the next videos.